Hello, everybody. Happy Memorial Day. I hope you went out and participated in all your local civic engagements. I just went to a Memorial Day parade here in Hudson County, New Jersey, and it was interesting. I actually make it a point to go to a Memorial Day parade of remembrance of some kind every year, usually in different parts of the country, wherever I happen to be. And I like, not to sound too obnoxious about it, but I do like to observe the differences in local customs because there are very few times over the course of a year where all these civic groups will come out and participate in the same event. And usually there's even a political dimension because all the local elected officials come. The mayor of the town where I was at was out today. And, taking part in parades is a long-standing tradition for political figures. I'm sure that the presidential candidates probably were all out and about today in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, etc. So, if you're a student or an observer of American civic life, and I like to think that I am, I'm also a participant because I'm also a citizen. Then I kind of recommended it, but you have to be a little bit of an oddball to actually derive some enjoyment from that kind of thing. So I acknowledge that I'm somewhat anomalous, but people complain about their isolation from community, and yet you have these communal events that these civic organizations do put on every year, and younger people don't tend to go. It's entirely retirees, not entirely, but whenever I've been to these things, I'm one of the younger adults there. Now there are kids there, usually because the schools march in the parade and they have the bands playing, and they have little kids come too with their families, but there aren't really any younger adults, say from ages 20 to 35 at these things. Now, maybe there are some at other localities that I haven't visited, but it's just my anecdotal observation. And it's not like you got to spend a whole day either. You go for a couple hours, even less. You sit and you watch the people marching down the street, playing songs. You chit-chat with folks. And usually there's free food somewhere. So you can't beat it. Anyway, enough about that. I wanted to remark briefly on this controversy raging right now as to the investigations into the origins of the Russia matter, meaning the FBI and CIA, NSA activity, which occurred in the early phase of the official investigation into Russian interference and the Trump campaign's supposed collusion with Russian interference. Largely, this took place in 2016. There's speculation it could have even began much, significantly earlier than that, perhaps back to 2015. And it seems to have continued into 2017. So we're talking about, a 2-year span roughly where there was a huge amount of unprecedented activity going on the part of the security state apparatus, which some refer to as the deep state. I'm not going to use that exact phrase because I think it's loaded with various connotations that aren't always used accurately. The deep state that Sean Hannity refers to is not quite the deep state that exists. But there is a vast literature, well predating the Trump administration, that talks about the political interests of the security state apparatus. You can call it the permanent government. I have a book on my shelf right now called National Security and Double Government, which is a great book if you want to read an academic take on what this supposed deep state is actually composed of. So anyway, you had a lot of totally unprecedented actions occurring during this time period where FISA warrants, at least one that we know of, was obtained on a Trump campaign official, that being Carter Page. This was in October of 2016. And remember, a FISA warrant allows you to collect all kinds of incidental information, not just on the exact individual subject of the warrant, but on anybody with whom that person communicates. So that FISA warrant could have been just an inroad into a broader surveillance effort on the Trump campaign, perhaps even Trump himself. Remember, Trump famously said that his wires were tapped at Trump Tower. And although wires probably weren't tapped, it does seem to be true that there were extraordinary surveillance efforts, brought to bear on Trump and his associates. So you have, the Carter Page FISA. You have other potential FISA warrants that haven't yet been revealed. I mean, we only really have the information on the FISA warrant on Carter Page, believe it or not, because of Louise Mensch, who actually did break that story because she had people in the British national security apparatus feeding her information on that. So there could be more that has yet to come out. But that's part of why we have an investigation right now, or investigations into the origins of the Russia investigation, because there are so many unanswered questions and so many facts that have yet to be ascertained and publicized. So you got to think to yourself, why would it be such a horrible thing to just do an investigation on the investigation? So investigate the investigators or whatever. That's also known as oversight. That's why you have civilian review boards in municipalities who scrutinize police activity. So it's not just the police imposing accountability on themselves, because self-imposed accountability never works. It has to come from an external source in order to really have teeth. And yet Democrats are screaming that it's a horrible authoritarian power grab for the Trump administration to endeavor to uncover information relating to the conduct of the FBI, NSA, and CIA in 2016. Now, I always thought it was a progressive principle to want to impose maximum transparency on those extremely secretive entities. Because if you don't have transparency, you're basically thwarting democratic will, because it allows them to operate in the dark. Notwithstanding their amazingly intrusive powers to delve into the private affairs of American citizens. That was the whole point of the Snowden revelations. Snowden recognized that the NSA had accrued to itself massive powers to become involved in all manner of facets of ordinary Americans' lives, and Americans had no ability to exercise judgment on whether they felt that those actions were appropriate. So Snowden leaked damning material, and just as he predicted would happen, a lot more attention and scrutiny came to be applied to the tactics and powers of the NSA. Now, I'm not saying that Bill Barr is presiding over a Snowden-style reckoning, but nonetheless, if he releases information that was classified and it sheds light on the activities that took place on the part of these entities in 2016-17, what's so bad about that? I mean, Democrats scream that they can't trust Bill Barr to conduct an impartial investigation because he acts like Trump's personal lawyer, which is so stupid. Bill Barr is not acting like Trump's personal lawyer. Trump appointed Bill Barr, and then Bill Barr was confirmed by the Senate, in part, yes, because Trump recognized that Barr had certain views of presidential power that were on the permissive side. I don't agree with that view. for the most part. But if you look at what Bill Barr has said over the course of his dealings with the Russian investigation, none of it is really based on any notion of presidential power that he has that is excessively permissive. It's all been a relatively kind of standard just conveyance of the facts at hand. Now, if some matter does come before Bill Barr, where he, allows Trump to get away with a genuine power grab, then I'll be the first to comment on it. But that hasn't really happened yet. And Trump delegating to Barr the authority to declassify pertinent information doesn't seem like a hugely consequential power grab. If anything, it seems like actually you're diminishing the power of the executive branch by subjecting the CIA, NSA, and FBI to transparency initiatives. So you're actually reducing their power in a sense. Those are, after all, executive branch entities. So Democrats who are talking about some kind of authoritarian takeover aren't really ever precise in what it is that they're complaining about. If they aren't opposed on principle to an investigation into these matters and simply hate Bill Barr, okay, then who are you saying ought to be entrusted to carry out the investigation? I haven't really heard many suggestions on that front. Rather, I hear them saying that no investigation is needed at all. That's what Adam Schiff says. Amy Klobuchar did an interview around a week ago where she said no investigation at all was needed into the origins of the Russia stuff. So it seems as though they're using their Bill Barr mania as a pretext for arguing that no investigation whatsoever is actually required. Therefore, they're arguing in bad faith, which shouldn't be surprising because that's what they do all the time with regard to this investigation. And yeah, Republicans also argue in bad faith to some extent, but at least they're arguing in bad faith now on behalf of transparency. Like, I don't think Lindsey Graham, who now is on the transparency bandwagon, has really any principled view on these intelligence agencies arrogating to themselves excessive power. Lindsey Graham would love for these agencies to have unchecked, unfettered power. So I think Lindsey Graham is in part at least motivated by a relatively narrow, relatively self-interested, partisan belief in how this entire Trump-Russia drama has unfolded. So I don't absolve Lindsey Graham and other militaristic, authoritarian-leaning Republicans in now having this kind of virtuous epiphany where they're all of a sudden interested in transparency for its own sake. No, that's not right. But at the same time, Democrats are now the one using bad faith arguments to demand less transparency. That's the ultimate effect of what they're arguing. And if they're not arguing that, let them propose other methods by which these governmental records can be ascertained and publicized. Because that's fundamentally what this is. It's taking information which has been suppressed by the government and allowing the public to see it. And it's also ironic because the Democrats have been screaming incessantly and shrilly for years that every single aspect of Russian interference and Trump's collusion thereof should be investigated to the utmost. We have to turn over every stone, look in every nook and cranny. We have to do the most thorough investigation known to man into everything from Russian Facebook trolls and Twitter bots to, spear phishing Gmail attempts, all those incredibly scary interference attempts. We have to investigate every last aspect of all of that. But now they're saying we can't investigate the conduct of our own intelligence and law enforcement entities as it relates to the beginnings of this entire melodrama. Now, why is that? Well, I think I know why John Brennan, for example, is very opposed to this. He was on the Chris Hayes show on Friday night where, shocking no one, Brennan was shrieking how outrageous it was that Trump had issued this directive where he was delegating to Barr the authority to declassify all materials that Barr deemed appropriate related to the origins of the Russian investigation. Now, why wouldn't John Brennan be thrilled about that development? I don't know. Maybe it's because John Brennan was actually running the CIA at the time, and he doesn't want his conduct to be uncovered and publicized because it would make him look bad. That's a possible motive. I don't know. It seems far-fetched that could be what's motivating John Brennan. But it seems like a plausible theory to me. Remember, it came out not too long ago that John Brennan, or the CIA anyway, under John Brennan, was pushing the Steele dossier. Bob Woodward reported this. Woodward said that John Brennan's CIA was, quote, pushing the Steele dossier at a crucial juncture in 2016 in the summer when these investigations were ramping up. So, if John Brennan's conduct as it relates to the Steele dossier comes out, there's a pretty darn good likelihood that it will make John Brennan look not just foolish, but potentially even criminal. So that could be a pretty plausible motive why he'd prefer that that material be kept concealed. What's so hilarious is that the Democrats are parroting Brennan's line. Remember, Brennan is now an employee of NBC Universal. So he's a colleague of Chris Hayes's. And he's a colleague of everybody else who works for that news organization. And Brennan has been allowed, because he's been one of the chief experts on everything Trump-Russia, Brennan has essentially been allowed to shape the coverage of Trump-Russia on that network. And it's made him look extraordinarily idiotic in many instances, such as when he predicted that, Don Jr. and Kushner or whatever were going to be marched out of the White House in handcuffs. And then like a week or so later, Mueller submits his report and nobody's indicted on anything having to do with conspiracy with Russia. And, Kushner and Don Jr. are laughing all the way to the wherever you go when you're not indicted. But Brennan's parroting this line now, along with his Democratic friends, saying that national security could be endangered by the release of this information. Now, he doesn't specify exactly what could be endangered or how the release of these government records would endanger anybody, but he just says it, and it sounds legitimate because he's a former CIA director, so of course he has some perceived authority on these issues. And Brennan also makes blanket appeals to putting lives at risk if this information comes out. Now, if I were Chris Hayes, I would probably want to press Brennan for some specificity as to what exactly he's referring to when he says that lives could be put at risk. What lives could be put at risk exactly if we come to know more about the exact machinations of the CIA, NSA, or FBI in relation to the 2016 investigations? It's easy to just assert that as a scaremongering tactic, but it's a little more hard to actually substantiate what you're shrieking about with actual evidence and concrete examples. But that kind of logic is always what's used when government officials and their, bootlicking allies in the media don't want the public to be able to scrutinize the actions that they've taken behind closed doors. They want it sealed and repressed in perpetuity. So these, the old style authoritarian, Republicans largely, but also many Democrats who would argue all the time, in the Bush years and even the Obama years, that shining a light on government actions, whether it's the CIA, FBI, whatever, is just broadly endangering to national security. And they hardly ever give examples because the examples never pan out. The examples almost always invariably are proven to have been a total fiction as to them actually creating risk for anybody in terms of national security. It's always just a pretext to keep that information swept under the rug so the public can't view it for themselves. And what also makes no sense about the Democratic argument is because on the one hand, they're screaming that Trump is doing a cover-up. That's what Nancy Pelosi dramatically proclaimed last week, and which caused this meltdown in terms of their dealings with Trump on legislative issues, namely infrastructure. Nancy Pelosi said that Trump is engaged in a cover-up. And my first question was, okay, what exactly is Trump covering up? I mean, did he cover up the Mueller report? No, the 448-page report, which comprehensively detailed Trump's personal conduct. I mean, these people say that Barr is acting as Trump's personal attorney. If your personal attorney himself releases a 448-page document detailing all manner of conduct of yours that could potentially be viewed as criminal, and your lawyer wasn't actually obligated legally to release that document, then you should fire your attorney, because your lawyer is doing a horrific job and is probably exposing you to legal jeopardy. That's what Barr did to Trump. Barr was not obliged to release that document per Department of Justice regulations. He did it because he was making an extra step to be transparent, because he knew that there would be huge political ramifications if he declined to release that document. And I'm not saying that Barr should have repressed the document. I think everybody should have been able to see it. I'm just saying that, yes, this idea that he was acting as Trump's attorney and yet simultaneously releasing this, at least arguably incriminating document on Trump doesn't make any sense. And neither does it make any sense for Democrats like Pelosi and others to be screaming cover up. They won't specify what exactly is being covered up, but they'll say cover up, and then on the other hand, they'll say that Trump is releasing too much information. So we're mad and we're upset that Trump is actually taking steps to release more information than he's obliged to do by delegating to Barr this authority to declassify relevant materials. So these prongs of their argument don't accord with one another. They kind of just collapse into incoherence. But collapsing into incoherence is one of the great specialties of late for Democrats, and Republicans are guilty of it on other occasions. But at least as it relates to the Russia fiasco, Democrats are by far the worst culprits. So there you have it. Again, enjoy the remainder of your Memorial Day, and I will talk to you all later.